It can be said that history is composed of these fires, from the ones who decide to change, to the ones who create, to those who seek power, to those who seek to manipulate, others who transform and adapt, those who rationalize, those who want nothing but power, those who are determined and focused in their mission. There are the great leaders that stand to make nations proud, those who look to their country and see better, those who change the social order by usurping it, those who have lived their lives spending it waiting for it to change, and who have changed it themselves now that they are in power, those who use their authority and guidance to rule over their civilians and to help them, and those who seek peace, who diplomatically apply themselves. They are great. Perhaps not all of them. There are certainly those who abuse their flames, who can never be satiated. Of course, not everyone can be a leader with great ambition. There are those who lived their lives day to day throughout history, their flames quelled or abandoned, who accepted the status quo, and who lived in it. And of course, there are those in between the two extremes, flames that cannot be satiated, those who are called greedy and vain. They may be, but what is certain about them is that they are voracious. Directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and based on the book Oil by Upton Sinclair, the 2007 period film There Will Be Blood is a story about early 1900s America, specifically one man within early 1900s America. This man, Daniel Plainview, is played by actor Daniel Day-Lewis. One driven to succeed, we witness his transformation from lone digger to millionaire, and the way that journey affects himself and those around him. With the same director as Magnolia and The Master, this film has incredible shots, impeccable moments, and immaculate dialogue, and it is all tied together by the performance of Daniel Day-Lewis, whose character brings life and energy to a time and a place that shouldn't have it. I would recommend this film to everyone and anyone, especially those who are watching this video. I will not be providing a synopsis or summary, so as a result, the delving into of the themes and story will all be for those who have seen it. Plainview is a hard-working and determined man. We see him attempt to get something throughout the entire film. His drive is pushing him towards something. This veracity is embodied in the way he interacts with the liquid around him. In the very beginning, we see that he is completely barred from liquid, being in a desolate desert, and having to spit to clean the silver he digs for. When the baby boy is left an orphan, Plainview feeds him a bottle of liquid, representing the power dynamic that ensues between the son HW and the father Daniel himself, wherein Daniel uses HW to appeal to those potential buyers, and thus elevate his position of power even further. Whenever a great loss occurs to one of the characters, such as the death of a coworker, or the loss of one's dignity and eventually also one's life, or the loss of one's hearing, the characters end up covered in oil. Not something that they are consuming, however. It is not power that they are gaining, but the results of power being lost. Power can also be taken forcefully. When Plainview talks to Mary about her father beating her, and tells her it won't happen again, we learn that the father is right across, and in fact, Plainview sits in front of an empty drink, having a parallel to a very familiar and very iconic scene near the end. He has drunk the power from the father and given it to himself, and has thus earned the respect of the child. As Daniel and Henry finish marking out the tract of the pipeline, they encounter the ocean. Now, the ocean is the epitome of liquid. It is a vastness so great that it cannot be drained, an abundance so deep it cannot be taken. Even in the midst of this, Plainview looks unhappy. He is discontent with the abundance around him. This thematic element of dissatisfaction is cemented when Plainview discusses a house he looked upon with envy as a child, one that he wanted and one that he could now have, as Henry points out. However, Plainview responds with a smirk and says that if he got that house now, it'd probably make him sick. The nature and framing of this interaction paints it as the catalyst that leads Plainview to deduce that Henry is a false brother, an imitator, an imposter. This is less about the fact that he was an imposter and more about the idea that he intruded on Plainview's lifestyle, that Plainview was open with him and discussed his hatred, his misanthropy, and his ultimate dissatisfaction with life, his drive for competition. Thusly, he decides to kill Henry, burying his body and later lamenting in flame. This spilling of blood, coupled with the desire to have the pipeline through Bandy's property, leads Daniel to his next encounter with Liquid, the baptism. Here, Eli metaphorically attempts to rebirth Daniel, which is unsuccessful as we see him mutter pipeline as soon as it is all over. This shows that Plainview is motivated not by any religious or human feeling, but out of a desire to acquire, to gain. The resolution of Daniel's nature and greed is reached at the end of the film, where Daniel is left an alcoholic, where he chews the steak and spits it back out. Perfect encapsulation of his dissatisfaction and stealing of life. He tells Eli that every day he drinks the blood of lamb from Bandy's tract. With this phrase, he unites oil, blood, and water, creating the archetypal liquid, the idea of power, and the idea of never being satisfied by it. Just as he drains the juice from the steak, or sucks the oil out of the ground, or utilizes drainage to get the liquid he desires, he also ends up sucking up all the love in his life and all of the connections he forms between those and others. The primary one is between himself and his son, H.W. Being a taciturn child with a reticent father, the relationship between H.W. and Plainview has always been rocky. Because H.W. is meant to be a face for the client to appreciate, he can often be treated as an object or as a commodity by the father. But Plainview often shows love for his son in unexpected ways. For instance, when Plainview sends his son to a deaf school to be able to learn sign language, it is an act of compassion, and he misses him dearly, hugging him tightly when H.W. finally returns, despite his upsetness. And when Eli comes with his usual stick to blame Plainview for all the misfortune in life, Plainview becomes enraged and begins to beat Eli, dragging him about in oil and covering him with it, all while demanding why, if Eli was a healer, why can he not heal his son of deafness? This shows that Plainview genuinely cares for H.W. and is extremely upset when H.W. is hurt. In the final act of the film, we see the relationship between H.W. and Daniel finally broken, when Daniel tells H.W. the truth of him being an orphan, after H.W. wants to become independent, going with Mary to be wedded and to start his own company. This independence from Daniel leaves him upset. He wants H.W. to remain with him. That is why he calls after him, calling him lower than a bastard, despite the fact that H.W. is literally deaf. This is encapsulated perfectly in a short flashback to the past. In it, H.W. and Plainview amicably tussle around with one another. Eventually, H.W. and Mary end up exiting stage left, while Plainview is forced to relegate to the background, to a giant wooden house that stands empty, devoid of any other presence beside himself. This represents his eventual isolation and loneliness, something he wanted and wished for, something he said would complement his misanthropy, his hatred of people, and the fact that he was doing all this just to get away from them. But once he finally does have his wish, he is still not content. He ends up dressing shabbily, his shoes full of holes, and leaving a mess wherever he goes. The only moment where he is truly content seems to be the moment when the fire erupts from the oil rig, when he realizes the ocean of oil that is underneath them. And both he and Fletcher end up joyous, prancing around it and glaring onwards at the beautiful spectacle. The outline of the oil rig itself looks like an evil eye, glaring back at Daniel, showing him that he can never be happy and that this is the one moment he can actually achieve something. Even the rhythmic beating of the oil rig is redolent of something from the Bible, an evil god that sprays forth flame and black smoke across the land. There's a bunch of biblical imagery in this tale as well. We have the father, Abel, and his sons, Eli and Paul. Eli, almost killing the father, is redolent of Cain. And Abel, like Paul, is very fortunate. Although Paul does not end up dead, he ends up with the rest of the money. Much like a parable, Paul manages to get out of the situation quickly, with $500, or perhaps $10,000 with $5,000 per week if Plainview was correct. While Eli is hit hard by the Great Depression, and has to go to Daniel for money, begging him and being forced to confront his lack of faith in God and perhaps his misotheism as well. We see Eli break down, screaming that he is a false prophet in a manner similar to the way that Daniel admitted to abandoning his child and to wanting the blood of the lamb. In this sense, we see that Plainview is a truly twisted person. He wants to see Eli broken, and we see that Plainview is reduced to saying that he is the third revelation, screaming that he is the one that brought change to the town, that he is the one who changed it all. In a scene mirroring HW's initial discover and stepping on of the oil, we see that Plainview steps in the blood of Eli, and has finally completed the cycle from discovering the well to having used it up completely. At the very end, while he is alone, we see him utter the phrase, "I'm finished." And with it, we understand that he truly is, that he has done with life and he has completed his journey, and that he is still left, ever so voracious.